School. So today is very important. It's a great opportunity for us because we have a number of candidates and political figures here today to kind of talk about the importance of being involved, the importance of civic engagement. So we live in the best country in the world. Does not mean we're perfect, okay? In fact, the framers of the Constitution, the preamble said in order to form a more perfect union. They knew that our country was not perfect. But the story of our country, our American history, is about working towards becoming more perfect. We still have a ways to go, okay? But we have an election coming up in a couple weeks. And we got to keep in mind that not everyone has always had a chance to vote. That our history is about expanding the opportunities to vote to different people. At first it was just white men with land. Then it was all men. And then we gave the right to vote to African Americans. Then we gave the right to vote to women. Then we gave the right to vote to those who are 18, 19, 20 years of age. So we are continually trying to make sure that everyone can participate in our democracy. And this today is an example of that, how we are trying to engage you, our future voters, in the process and why it's important to be involved in politics, involved in our government, even at the local level here in the Wheeling and state of Illinois areas. So I'd like to thank Mrs. Jerry Songer from Elk Grove High School who helped organize this for our high school. Give her a round of applause. I'd also like to thank Miss Rubin and Mr. Hanrahan who organized this today. So please give those two individuals a big round of applause. I think you'll find today's activity very engaging, very informative, and you'll get a lot out of it. So at this time, please welcome Ms. Rubin.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Wheeling High School's first Engaged Student Engagement Initiative. Our third president, Thomas Jefferson, said, "The cornerstone of democracy rests on the foundation of an educated electorate." As some of you may know, on August 21st, 2015, Governor Rauner signed House Bill 4025 into law, requiring that Illinois high schools throughout the state add a civics component to their curriculum. This law comes at a time when our country, state, county, and city are facing issues from growing our economy, to preserving our planet, to protecting us from crime at home and terrorists abroad, all while trying to allow us to live as freely as possible. On Tuesday, November 6th, our country will have an election where many candidates, including some on this stage today, will ask the voters for an opportunity to represent all of you when making important decisions at the federal, state, and local level. You may hear the term midterm when you hear these elections being discussed in the media because they are taking place in the middle of a president's four-year term. Although President Trump is not on the ballot, these elections are sometimes considered by many to be a measure of how much people approve of how the party in power is doing. At the national level, that party is the Republican Party. But in Illinois, our power at the state level is divided between a democratically controlled state assembly and a Republican governor. Today during lunch periods, students had the opportunity to meet with representatives from the League of Women Voters to vote in a mock election and to register to vote. Before we meet our candidates, I'd like to first call up Ben Silver from the Citizens Advocacy Center, followed by Heidi Graham from the League of Women Voters, who would like to share a few words about their organizations. Please welcome Ben Silver.
Hey, good afternoon. That's my boss up there, not me, but all that contact info will get you to our organization. So my name is Ben Silver. I'm a community lawyer with the Citizen Advocacy Center. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan community legal organization. So nonpartisan, that means we aren't associated with any of the parties, we don't endorse them or their candidates. We are an educational resource, a legal resource for people who are looking to find out more about their government, especially on the local level. So related to today, if you're interested in finding out about elections, you can come to us. If you're interested in running for office, you can come to us and find out how. We do a whole ton of voter and citizen education. Some of the other things we do are help people through day-to-day laws in their local government, whether they're trying to get information, change something in their local government, get something done, figure out how to make a change of a policy that they want to. And the laws that we typically deal with that are the Freedom of Information Act, the Open Meetings Act, and then the First Amendment, your right to free speech. So I doubt many of you know about the Freedom of Information Act, but you actually have the right to get information from the government, whether it's the state or your school district or your village. You can send them a request for information, and the presumption is any document that they have is available for the public to view and receive. There are limitations on that. If you go and ask my old school district for my school records or something, not only would you not want to see that, but it's private information. So there are some exceptions to what you can get from the government, but generally if you want to find out, you know, why a certain building is there, or you know, what the government did with money last year, you can ask for all that information and it's available to you. The second law we deal with a lot is the Open Meetings Act. And the Open Meetings Act says that all meetings of public bodies in Illinois have to be open to the public, that they have to let you know what's going to happen at the meeting, and that you actually have the right to speak there. So if you see something in your community that you want changed, you can actually go to a meeting and tell your local officials what it is that you want. And that leads me to that third law I talked about, the First Amendment, or free speech. So how many of you think you have your full First Amendment free speech rights in school? What do you think? A few people, yeah? No, a lot of you don't think so? Well, I can tell you it's complicated. This area of law starts to emerge in the late 60s. There's a case called Tinker versus Des Moines. And in the late 60s, the Vietnam War was going on, and a lot of students were against it. And some students in Des Moines decided to wear black armbands to high school to protest the war. And the school actually sent them home. They said, you can't do that. You know, we don't think this speech belongs in school. And what this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and what the Supreme Court said is that your First Amendment rights do not end at the schoolhouse gate. We don't have gates anymore, but what they mean is that your rights don't end when you get to school. And yet, there are restrictions. I know Mr. Cook talked about how to behave in this assembly versus a rally, so there are clearly restrictions on what you can say and when while you're in school. So for instance, as time went on, the Supreme Court made a few different decisions. One of them, for instance, was about an assembly a little like this. It was leading up to an election, a very high stakes election. It was for the student president, the class body president. And one of the candidate's friends made a very lewd speech, a lot of double entendres and things like that. And he got in trouble, and he sued, and the court said, no, actually the school can restrict that. That doesn't belong in school. It's a substantial disruption to the learning environment, and the school can restrict that. There was another one where there was a rally outside of school, and a student held up a sign that said, "Bong hits for Jesus." If anyone can, I'm still not sure what that means, but, and I guarantee that our Supreme Court, you know, with the average age of like 95 didn't know what it meant either, but they decided that the school could restrict you. You can't have a sign like that if the school says it's not allowed. So basically, we're in a situation where you do have your First Amendment rights in school, but it's a question of when, and it's a question of there are certain things that are disruptive to the school environment that might not be allowed. So in terms of time, you know, I could talk during lunch about an issue that's really important to me, but maybe not during class. So for instance, I'm a dog person, and I think that cats should be taxed and dog food should be free. And if I talk to my friends about that during lunch, I might end up eating lunch alone, but you know, the school can't restrict me. But if I talk about that in the middle of math class when we're supposed to be doing work or answering a question on the board, I definitely could get in trouble, get us disciplined for that. So that's the type of issue that we might deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I want to make sure that we have time for you guys to hear from the candidates. So thank you all for listening, and please feel free to find me if you want to hear more information.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing today? How's that? So just quickly, I'll let you know your results. 9% of students participated in today's mock election, which is good because only 5% of students in Elk Grove participated in the mock election, but that pretty much means that for every 10 of you, one person was making the decisions. Just to know. So, anyway, who the heck am I? My name is Heidi Graham, and I'm a mom of kids about your age. I have a daughter who is a sophomore at Emerson College in Boston, and I have a son who's a sophomore at Prospect High School. And I am also the president of League of Women Voters. Like today, we do things like we run mock elections in schools. We register voters. We may have been registering voters here in your school this year. And we empower voters all across our communities. One of the things that we've done is we give kids on their 18th birthday in District 214 a gift that includes a vote sticker and a stylus that says the vote is mightier than the pen. And this is just so we can encourage them to vote when they're old enough to vote. So yeah, I think voting is pretty important. I'm a volunteer. I'm not getting paid to be here. I spend pretty much all of my time trying to empower voters, and I put my money where my mouth is. So I do believe in our motto, which is empowering voters and defending democracy. And that's women and men, old and young, and everyone in between. So I guess that's why they asked me to come here today to talk to you about why you should vote. And then I thought about what I was like when I was your age, when I was in high school, and what my reaction to some middle-aged white lady coming to school to talk about why I should vote. And frankly, in the days before cell phones, and I am that old, I would have been in the back corner passing notes about how lame and boring this lady was. So if you decide to tweet about how lame and boring I am today, I'm just going to ask you to tag us at LWVAHBG. Because any publicity is good publicity. We even have a mascot dog, a rescued greyhound on Instagram. He's Ferris 4 Votes, F-E-R-R-I-S, the number 4 votes. He's super cute. But I digress. So I decided that you guys didn't need to listen to me. I know a lot of people your age, and I decided to ask all of them why they should vote and why they thought voting was important. And here are some of the things that they told me. The first text came from a young man who admitted to me that he had never voted. He said, personally, I find it hard to sift through biased information and make an objective, informed decision on who to vote for, especially when there's so much drama and unnecessary noise coming from those running, calling out other politicians rather than telling me what you'll do. So hopefully today's politicians will tell us what they're going to do and not call each other out. And he went on to say, with recent political changes, I think so many people want to disassociate from the government out of frustration. But this is the time that we need to be present, especially young people, in the elections we're shaping our future. Absolutely, voting shapes your future, but it can be overwhelming and daunting and confusing. But he realizes that's important enough to take a little bit of time to be informed and vote. And League can help you do that. League of Women Voters can help you do that. Did I already tell you to follow us on social media? So anyway, follow us on social media. But the rest of the texts were, yes, I vote, and here is why. I think it's important as our civic duty. We're all lucky to live in a country with freedom of speech and many other liberties other people in the world aren't fortunate enough to have. So if the one thing we have to do to keep it that way is to vote, it's well worth it. And I can agree with that. I promise you I wanted to march in last week's Women's March, and I wanted that opportunity to march to be my protected right. And there are still places in the world where citizens don't have those same freedoms. A few people want to have representatives who share their same values. I got this. I believe it's important to be part of the political process, and it's also important for me to put people in office who I think are going to do the best job and make progress on the issues I care about. Or I vote because I want my representatives to value the same issues and concerns I have as a citizen. I actually feel that most people in office don't, so I want to change that. Well, I do know that through my work with League, our representatives, they listen when we call, when we write, when we text, and we tweet to them. Some more than others. And so I make my choice on how I vote based on how well I think they listen to me. In fact, I've personally met with almost all of my representatives, and most are reasonable. The ones who aren't, well, I can promise you I'll be casting a vote to remove them from office in a few weeks. One answer I got was quite forward-thinking. I think that voting is important for young people in particular because the decisions being made now are going to affect us for our whole lives. Unlike older generations, we'll deal with repercussions or enjoy the benefits of the decisions we make. In our state, I will tell you, in our state, we are having to deal with things put into action when I was born, and that was a long time ago. The pension crisis you hear so much about, and if you haven't heard about the pension crisis, you've most likely heard about the high tax that your parents complain about. I know I complain about them. But those are a direct result of the pension crisis, and the pension crisis has been difficult to manage because of an ill-conceived clause in our state's 1972 Constitution. I was born in 1970, so yeah, the decisions that we make today will affect you for a long time. I love this reason that someone gave me for voting, and because it was local and it was concrete. She just said, if you complain about potholes, then vote for someone who'll work to repair our streets. Yeah, a lot of what we vote on absolutely affects our day-to-day life, like potholes on the city streets, like the lights that you turn on in your house, like the water that you turn on to take a shower. As a military brat, my father served in the Air Force for 24 years. I often give the following reason myself, but love to hear it from someone half my age. I vote because it's important to exercise the right that others have fought for. It's important because it gives us voice. My daughter's best friend texted this to me, and she made me really proud and also proved to me that she was actually listening and not slumped in the back corner. She said, I vote because it's my civic duty and responsibility, and by participating in the democratic system, I help to guarantee its ability to function as an institution. On a different level, I find voting to be very important. I guess the best reason I can give is that the enemy of the justice is inaction, not injustice. So I think it's important to participate if you want to live in a just society. I love that because I too want to live in a just society. Which brings me to my last response. One of my neighbors moved to Florida and her children attend Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. As a mother, I can't imagine what it was like for my friend that day when her children were in school and she had no idea if they were safe or not. I can't imagine what it must have been like for the students and the teachers to be in attendance at school the day of the single largest shooting in American history. And her daughter gave me this reason for why she votes. I vote because I personally experienced a school shooting that killed 17 of my classmates and teachers. I understand the importance of local elections, like the school board, the governor, our state, the president, in a whole new way. And I also vote because we live in a multicultural, multi-generational community, and the elected officials need to better balance the diversity, the age, the gender, the color, the socioeconomic level of the people. So, I hope that one of those reasons resonates with you and sticks with you, and I hope that you vote. Thank you for having me.
fortunate to live in this great nation, this constitutional democracy. And that document, our Constitution, written over 200 years ago, was not perfect, but it really gave us a guideline and a map that we followed to this moment in history. And one of the things it says is that every 2 years, the citizens of America have an opportunity to speak, not just words, but more importantly, to make decisions that speak to their values. That's what an election is all about. If you spend your time either praising or criticizing the government we have, your opportunity every 2 years is to step up and make sure your vote counts in terms of the future of this government and what it's going to do for you. I remember going into the NBC studios in New York City for a show, and on the way in I spotted one of the Parkland students. I'd seen him on TV. He didn't waste any time. He came up to me and he said, "I want to know what your situation is when it comes to the gun lobby. Do you take money from the gun lobby?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I hope that you'll be on our side when it comes to gun safety." And I said, "I certainly will. I'm sorry for what you've gone through, and your friends as well." Those Parkland students made a big difference. They were so credible. They were ruthless when it came to politicians of both political parties, and they really held us accountable. That's what a democracy is all about. These students are leading in establishing democratic values that are important for our future. Every student should understand they have the same power and the same opportunity.
Those of you who are sitting there thinking, I'm not 18, what do I have to do? Why is this important to me? That's a great example of why this is relevant to you right now, today. Things that you guys think are important, things that are, issues that, you have a passion for, you have a voice. And we're encouraging you guys to use it. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come and listen to our candidates and elected officials. I thank you all for being so respectful and realizing that they've given time, valuable campaigning time. They've taken the time to come and talk to you guys today, and let them, they want to share their perspectives with you. I have some questions for you before we get started. First of all, how many of you just can't wait to speak publicly at an open board meeting? Anybody? Just can't wait to speak in front of a whole bunch of people at a public board meeting? I see some hands. You guys, make sure you come up and talk to these guys before they leave. How many of you are just sitting at the edge of your seats because you can't wait to put up a bunch of tacky yard signs? Yay! Definitely see these people before you leave, okay? I love tacky yard signs. How many of you love to bother the living daylights out of your neighbors who want nothing, absolutely nothing to do with you, as you try to arm them with very important information about their candidates? Who likes to annoy their neighbors? Come on, we got a lot of people on that one. Yeah, okay. You guys are perfect for this job. How many of you live to call people you don't know and to knock on doors only to be treated like an inconvenience, and that's by the really, really nice people? Okay, we have some campaign support for you guys before you leave. And how many of you, this is my personal favorite, my last one, how many of you are just chomping at the bit to learn more about things like infrastructure? Perfect, perfect. So, when I was your age, those delights were about the farthest things from my mind. But this thinking was very, very wrong. What I know now is that it's much easier to stop a problem before it gets started than to try to do something about it after it exists. I always thought voting was important, but I found it easy to get caught up in the day-to-day life. I was a busy mother, I had a career, I had students that I actually cared about, and every once in a while I actually liked to have fun. But then one day I had a very rude awakening. I realized that I had a problem in my backyard that was life-threatening. And by the way, it's in your backyard too. I learned that freight trains rolling alongside my home were carrying what's been compared to an atomic bomb-sized explosion. The cargo they carry is so toxic that it can kill a person in 2 breaths. The first thought shooting through my mind was that not long before, we had a derailment near my home. And my community depends on well water. I had my drinking water assessed, and it contained methane, along with other toxic chemicals. The next horrific thought assaulting me was the image of my daughter, who was pregnant at the time. She was pregnant, she was about 30, 33. And she had been drinking water from my home. Exposure to chemicals carried by these freight trains can cause cancer, sterility, birth defects, genetic mutations. And it can be years before any damage caused by exposure surfaces, and even if it does, I'll never be able to prove cause. I have no baseline for comparison. So in my very naive thinking, I figured my mayor, not a District 214 mayor, I figured he must not know, because surely he would tell us if there was something that dangerous rolling through our backyards. I thought, you know, if he had information that these trains that come with a 1 mile radius and 2 mile blast zone were there, he would tell us. And so I took it upon myself to go tell him. And let's just say that did not go well. Not only did he know, but he also had no intention of telling anybody in the community about the issue. So I figured I could spin my wheels trying to convince a mayor who obviously had no plans of doing what I considered his moral responsibility. Or I could do what I hoped someone would do for me if he or she knew what I knew. And so I decided to do whatever it was I could think of to tell people. And so I threw in my hat, like these people have done. And I experienced firsthand what it's like to campaign for public office. And this also was a very unpleasant experience. I'm sure they can tell you more about it. And what I learned after walking to over 5,000 homes, making what seemed like a gazillion phone calls to people who either weren't home, didn't answer, hung up, or gave me a piece of their mind, was that I had no business pointing my finger at my mayor. The person I needed to point my finger at was me. It was my fault that someone like that, who in my opinion had no business in public office, was now sitting in a position of authority. Waiting until you have a devastating problem in your own backyard is the wrong way to learn how important it is to pay attention to what's going on around you. The candidates and elected officials you're about to hear from are going to be making some of the most important decisions that will directly impact your quality of life and the lives of you and of your children and your grandchildren. So please listen to them. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's many ways that you can get involved. You can find the website information at engagetoday.com. You can come and speak to them when this is over. And if you don't like what you hear, I encourage you to run for office yourselves. It was a life-changing experience for me. And with the support of your communion, you can be the change that's needed. I'd like to thank Jerry Cook for opening up the doors to our candidates and allowing students to take time from their busy schedules to come and listen to what they have to say. And thank you to our tech and custodial staff for being the nuts and bolts behind the scenes. I'd like to thank Aaron Brooks from District 214 Education, Community Education, for taking the time to provide direction and help to make connections. Hats off to Citizen Advocacy Center, who's helped me at the time when I needed help most. They were my first line of defense. And to Heidi Graham and Stacy Tubman from League of Women Voters for describing to our students the important work they do, and even how students who are not yet 18 can take action to make their communities better and to improve their quality of life for future generations. Thank you so much, Jim Schluchner, who will be joining us very shortly. He helps students formulate questions, and he will be co-moderating. He is from the Daily Herald. And last but not least, a big shout out to Barry Hanhan, Sarah Stubing, and Adriana Soto for the work they've done to help prepare students and staff for this event. Thank you all for helping to make this initiative come together for our students and for taking the time to invest in our hope for a future, a better future.
Thank you. Today we have the great honor and privilege of welcoming candidates and elected officials from a variety of different levels of government. As we begin our forum, I'd like to introduce our guests and provide a brief description of their backgrounds. I ask that our guests come to the stage one at a time as I introduce them, stand as I read their biography, and then be seated. Before I introduce the candidates, I want to remind all of you what Mr. Cook said earlier about the nature of what we're doing today. All of your devices should be away. You should be listening to all these candidates who have taken their time to come and speak to you, and we want to respect their time. Thank you. Our first candidate is Doug Bennett. Mr. Bennett, come on up. Mr. Bennett is running for Illinois' 10th Congressional District. He pledges to fight for our shared values in Washington, D.C. Mr. Bennett supports lowering taxes on hardworking families and businesses, reforming healthcare to make it more affordable, and cutting government waste while supporting common sense educational reform. He is committed to cleaning up Washington and changing the culture of corruption that has minimized the voice of the people and empowered the lobbyist and special interest. Mr. Bennett is a historian and mathematician and is currently working as an independent consultant. He graduated from Northwestern University with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Applied Mathematics. Mr. Bennett lives in Deerfield with his wife and 3 children. Fighting for his seat in the 29th Senate District. Oh, I'm sorry, you're all good. That's you. Thank you. At this point, we would like to welcome challenger Barrett Davie. Fighting for his seat in the 29th District, Barrett Davie. He's a candidate who was born and raised on the southwest side of Chicago, where his father was a Chicago police officer. His mother, you can clap for that, yeah. His mother, a Polish immigrant, came through Ellis Island in 1950. Mr. Davie attended Tulane University in New Orleans, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in history with a minor in earth science. After graduation, Mr. Davie moved to Washington, D.C. to work as a member of the United States House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform investigative staff. He then returned to Chicago to attend the Chicago-Kent College of Law. He served as the president of the Chicago-Kent Student Bar Association. During law school and while in private practice, Mr. Davie worked to support the efforts of a number of early-stage businesses in Illinois. It was during this time that he co-founded a sports marketing firm. He went on to serve as the company's CEO. Mr. Davie settled in Lake Forest and has 3 young children attending Lake Forest Public Schools. Thank you, Mr. Davie. Next is a contender for the 59th Illinois Representative District candidate, Karen Feldman. As a lifelong Illinoisan, Ms. Feldman is passionate about restoring Illinois to what it used to be, a place where companies and families moved to for a better and brighter future. She's running to end the culture of corruption and complacency in Springfield. She understands the need to work across the aisle and deliver common sense reform to Illinois. Ms. Feldman believes that education is the key to everything in life and therefore has put an emphasis on her own education. She graduated from DePaul University. Currently, she works in the real estate industry. With 26 years of experience, she understands how the increasing tax burden, especially high property taxes, have created hardships on families throughout the Chicagoland area. She's committed to eliminating those burdens on families by bringing fiscal responsibility to Springfield. Ms. Feldman is also a public servant in Lincolnshire, serving as the village trustee. As trustee, she has proven nonpartisan record of finding ways to work together to improve efficiencies that have promoted the growth throughout Lincolnshire. Thank you. Lastly, we would like to welcome College of Lake County Trustee Matt Stanton. Trustee Stanton is a practicing attorney and law professor who has dedicated his life to protecting and helping others. He was among the first of his generation to graduate college and did so while raising his 5 children, some with special needs as a single parent. In addition to being a trial attorney, Trustee Stanton has been an educator in Lake County schools and is an adjunct professor at the Chicago-Kent College of Law. He contended for the office of Lake County State's Attorney in 2016 general election and has been committed to volunteering and serving Lake County for the past 30 years in the areas of disabled sports, media education, and food bank relief work. Trustee Stanton maintains, inequality is probably the major social issue of our time. Education is the surest road to self-improvement for those who are willing to make the effort. It is more important than ever that we work to develop an educated and informed citizenry. Without access to quality education, public disclosure will suffer and the American dream will become increasingly unattainable for our children and grandchildren. The best solutions begin within the local community where citizens take an active role in maintaining and shaping their public institutions. Thank you, Trustee Stanton. Thank you to all of our candidates and elected officials who took the time today to be here with us. We have the good fortune of having 2 Wheeling High School debaters, Genevieve Halfman and Shanna McEwen, to co-moderate. Follow-up questions and redirection will also be provided by our monitor, Jim Slusher, Deputy Managing Editor from the Daily Herald. The questions that will be asked have been formulated by our students with help from Jim Slusher. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please write it on a note card and pass it toward the center aisle. There may be some students needing to enter or leave the theater when the passing bell rings. Please do so quietly without disrupting the discussion. Please refrain from packing up, getting out cell phones, or talking with friends until the panel discussion has officially ended. And with that, we will begin.
Thank you. Welcome. Before we begin, we'd just like to ask that you try to keep all of your responses below 3 minutes, so thank you. And for our first question, this will be for all of you, but we're going to go down the line and start with candidate Bennett. We just want you to quickly go over what issues are your top priorities.
Hi, I'm glad you're all here today. We have a lot of opportunity to talk with, wow, high school students. I just wanted to quickly go over one thing. What this is about the act of deciding. All this politics is you making a choice on what you want. And your engagement is about what you want to do. In truth, very few people vote out of the whole population. And that means the people who vote have a huge say in what happens. So I encourage you to vote because you have a multiplier effect of you voting. You are one of a far fewer group. In a primary, you only had 30,000 voters deciding who's running. In a general, we might have 1 in 2 voters show up, which means your voice matters a lot more than looks. My issues that we talk about runaway college tuitions, we talk about immigration reform, we talk about health care and health insurance. That's what we normally talk about. And I think are things that we hear at the door. I would tell you that if you do this, that we have found that most people, contrary to what you heard, are actually very nice people at the door. You don't have to be worried about them biting you or sicking the dogs, because most people really want to help you, and they really want to solve these problems, and they understand that the people up here are going to work for them. So it's not as bad as all that. It's a great experience, and feel free to come up and talk with people up here if you can.
Great. Good evening. So it's great to go after Doug because I can say that I agree with what Doug said. I appreciate everybody out there who fought loudly about getting involved. We'll make sure to recruit everyone after this. We'd love to have you out there in the next couple of weeks. It's a busy time. I'm Barrett, Davie, and I'm an entrepreneur. My wife is an entrepreneur. So we build businesses, and that's what we've done throughout our lives. And so when folks asked us about what we care the most about, it's about growth, and it's about opportunity, and it's about creating opportunity so that our children and young kids have the ability to do anything that they can dream of. And that's how we have grown up, we've been raised, and that's how we are raising our children, is to believe that anything is possible, which is why we are entrepreneurs and why we build businesses. I try to remind people all the time that in Illinois, we have incredible resources. So you're going to go off to college, and I hope that you come back if you go someplace else, because this state has all the resources you could ever want. We have the largest body of fresh water on earth. We have the best farmland on the planet. This is the intermodal transportation hub of the Western world. We have 36 Fortune 500 companies in the state. We have incredible college and university resources right here, second in the U.S. at Boston. We have an incredible group of young talent. And what I'm fighting for is to make sure that those resources can be taken advantage of by you, and that you'll want to come back here. The biggest challenges right now are our debt and our taxes, and that's what's leading to people leaving our state, and I don't want that to happen. I want people to want to be here, because I think this is the best state in the country.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. It gives me an opportunity to get my platform across to you all, and gives you an opportunity to skip class. To be honest, some of my top priorities are, number one is property taxes. They're out of control. It's like a second mortgage on your home. I'm sure you've heard your parents complaining about that. We really need to do something about that. It's really forcing our families to leave the state. Secondly, I'd like to bring businesses and jobs back to Illinois. I think the state here has made it so burdensome, these preparations to come here. And I'd like to reverse that and maybe get a little bit more revenue in the state from businesses coming here. Also, I'd like to keep our families here. You know, my parents came here as immigrants, planted their roots, chose this place to raise a family, and I've done the same with my family. And now I have a child in college, another one going off, and they may never come back here. And it's sad. I love Illinois. I want the state to be what it used to be and have the opportunities here again. I'd like to create fair and independent maps. This way voters can pick their representatives instead of having the politicians pick their voters. I'd like to create term limits. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that lately. And I also would like to get rid of some of the corruption, waste and abuse, and fraud that's going on in Springfield. Thank you.
My name is Matthew Stanton, and in my role as trustee of the local community college, Lake County, College of Lake County, what my concerns are primarily is to see that access to education remains available and is open to everything. College of Lake County is a very interesting place. There's a lot that happens there. There's very new things. We just put up a science center and a workroom that anybody can come into. That is 3D printers and all kinds of exciting, cutting-edge technological things. But beyond that, the cost of education is something that very much gets in the way of our progress, gets in the way of individual lives. And that's something that, as wealthy as this country is, we should be able to afford an education for everybody. We have very high quality professors and educators right here in Lake County. It's something to consider for you all as you think about what your future is going to be. Whether that involves a college degree in a profession, like I'm an attorney, or you want to become a nurse or an architect, or if it's something that you want to work in the trades or the mechanical trades and things like that. Those are decisions to think about. You want to think about what kind of debt you might be going forward with, But the last point I want to make in my 3 minutes is furthering your education. Not only benefits you economically, but it also is part of being a well-rounded human being in this society, because every one of you is somebody's son or daughter. You might be somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend. Someday you might be a mother and a father. You have all those roles, but you also have the role of being a citizen. And being a citizen, it's important to have a well-rounded education so that you understand how that infrastructure that Ms. Sumner talked about looks. That's nothing more than like when you take something apart and see what it's made of. And when you understand what it's made of, it's not as intimidating. It's something that you find that you can get in there and put your own hands on. Voting is good, but participation is what we need to make the changes that you are going to be shaping your world with, and with your own hands.
Thank you, candidates. So I'm glad a lot of you mentioned your roles in the education system, because that's what we're starting off with. So first, we'd like to address our state candidates, starting with candidate Davie. So our state colleges are suffering due to a lack of funding, and often our professors are instead turning to other states rather than Illinois. So what allocations do you support that will channel more funding to our colleges and maintain the quality of our campuses and educational resources?
So I think you have to start with thinking about what the role is of the state. I would suggest that the role of the state is fairly simple. I would say that education is number one priority, but not too distant second is public safety, infrastructure, transportation, and really a social safety net to support our citizens when they fall down. And I think that a state is supposed to provide for a very level playing field so that we can transact commerce and build businesses and create economy and create community and really tighten it all up. And so when we think about a state and providing for education, whether that's at the grade school or high school level or the university level, the reality here in Illinois, unfortunately, is that our state's funding of education has continued to decline. And it's part of the reason, getting back to Karen's comment about property taxes here locally, that our property taxes continue to go up. Because the state, which in 1970 provided 60% of the funding that went into the average school budget, today provides about 28%. And in this district, it's actually single digits based on my conversation with Dr. Schuler, who's been very informative in helping me to understand education. So as we ladder up to the university system, as somebody who personally had to take out $201,000 in student loan debt between college and law school, which I don't recommend, I would say that this challenge is going to continue to get worse unless our state legislature takes on the biggest issues that face our state. The biggest issue that faces our state, which will free up money for public education at the university level and at the local level, is really our retirement system, our public sector pension, challenge that we have. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that in this forum, but we want to protect our teachers, we want to protect our public employees who have worked hard and been in the system, but we also have to reform that system moving forward so that it's sustainable, so we can ensure that we meet our obligations and that we actually have a system that will allow us to grow in the future. And I think until we get that figured out, we're going to continue to see declining funds for everything else.
So to clarify, you want to address these other issues to tackle education instead of taking a direct approach to ensure that we fix the problem at the root of it?
Unfortunately, we just don't. We have to solve the resource issue. This year, out of the $38 billion budget, $9 billion went to fund pension contributions. Now we're still $3.2 billion short. And then second, this year we're going to pay $3.5 billion worth of interest, almost 9% of our state budget, because our credit rating is the worst in the country. So those are systemic problems that are very foundational to solving the problem that you're talking about. We have to take those problems on.
So education is probably the most important thing for you all to get ahead in life. We are, as Davie mentioned, that we are funded by the state at 28%. However, the Illinois Constitution requires that the state should be the majority funder of education. So where is all that money? I also think that another part of education would also be vocational training. I think it would be a good idea to focus on some programs about vocational training because college may not be the right fit for everyone. And plus there are a lot of jobs coming down in the future that require specific training that we don't have enough skilled workers for.
Thank you. Okay, so on the federal level, candidate Bennett, college education, as we mentioned, has become less and less affordable. So since the state is providing significantly less funding than past years, how can the federal government compensate to help make college more accessible for students that are pursuing higher education?
This is part of a much larger discussion. What we've done on the federal level is we've come in and we've promised people aid. What we've given them is tons and tons of debt. When Barrett just said that what he borrowed was some number with a lot of zeros at the end, I'm sure. How many people know what $200,000 even is? Anybody really? It's a house. This person had to borrow a house to go to school. I went to Northwestern and I did it. I had to borrow $14,000, which to me was just a car. What we've done is we've pretended we're helping. Yeah, I'm older than you are, I guess. So what we've done is we've pretended to help students by saying we have this aid and we give them a mountain of debt that they can't possibly pay off. And the other thing is that what we've done is that while we put all this money into the schools, we haven't given it to professors and people who are teaching or will be teaching you when you get there. What we've had is an explosion of deans regulating every part of your life. It's almost like staying at home. So when my daughter went to school, she called it a halfway house between being a child and an adult. It is your step into a larger world where you get to make mistakes, to get to learn, and to get to be on your own. And we have so many rules, and some of that's the federal government's fault, that we have promulgated through to this system that it is almost like having a mom and dad at your own college, which I disagree with and makes it much more expensive. We need to cull back a lot of these regulations, cull back a lot of the things that the colleges are doing that have nothing to do with education. Let them focus on education and bring the cost down for the people who are going to school. We're going to have to trust people to be grown-ups enough, you know, not to fall out of the second floor window and things like that, and not to have or pour hot coffee on themselves. And just be grown-ups and learn how to be grown-ups, knowing that there's a safety net under you. And I think we've lost that in the federal system. We're trying to protect you from every possible harm, and we're not really admitting that you are going to be an adult, you are just about adults, and we should be treating you as grown-ups, as capable, intelligent people. And this is your chance to spread your wings and to learn about all sorts of things and learn how to deal with people you don't know. And we've kind of stepped away from that. So at the federal level, we can both be smarter on how we fund education and make sure that we're focusing on putting money out there and not giving out debt. And also we can start pulling back on some of the overbearing regulations that cause the colleges to spend money just, keeping control of the students as opposed to teaching. And that's two things that we can do right away.
Thank you.
This question will be directed towards Trustee Stanton. So how can community colleges compete with state colleges to ensure that the education is both affordable and accessible, but still a very quality education?
Community colleges in Illinois are drawn from legislation that we actually have state laws that enable the community college system. And it's it's a jewel of the state, actually. We've got one of the best programs in the country. And our professors are pretty well paid. I mean, they make a good living, and we have some of the best professors. I went to the community college myself, the College of Wake County, and my two favorite professors were both women, and that's after going on to several colleges and law schools. So what we have is a first-class college. It's a 2-year college, but we have programs that we've been putting in place that allow you to obtain your 4-year degree, and we have plenty of those vocational and certificate programs too. So the goal of the community college is to respond to the community. And and that means the community of Lake County. So we are continuing to try and preserve what we've built up over time. Budget problems hit us too, but the community colleges are pretty well grounded. We do have to make changes on a federal level, I think. How money is loaned out, what is available for education as opposed to war. And I mean, what do you all think about that? You're living in a time when it's most likely that you're going to have a big debt if you try to go to school, wherever you go to school. And it's probably going to be twice as much as your parents and 4 times as much as your grandparents were. So what do you think about that? That's what you're in here. And that's what you have to get involved in. Because this is a democracy. And what we do on a federal and a state level, whether it's increasing corporate taxes. In the 1950s, we had a corporate tax rate that was triple what it is today. We have the largest corporations that paid 0 federal taxes last year. These things have to change if we're going to change our priorities as far as education and infrastructure. We have to put something into our civic life in our communities.
Thank you. Our next question is for the state candidates, and we'll begin with candidate Feldman. The question is, most people agree that the primary cause of Illinois' debt problem can be attributed to the unfunded liability accumulated as a result of our state legislators not using employer and employee contributions for their intended purpose. Given the current burden of the state pension system, how will you plan on reducing the Illinois debt problem and resolve the pension crisis, as it was brought up earlier?
So it's all on me, is that what you're saying? Okay. Pension crisis is really a huge problem. So there's been a lot of talk lately, a couple of solutions. The Chicago Federal Reserve Bank had suggested putting a surcharge on homes for their value, maybe the 1% value of their home, on top of the real estate taxes for 30 years just to combat this problem. I think that going forward, we need to update our pension system, and everyone, all new hires should be put in a predefined 401k plan or something that mimics the private sector. And there is a lump sum payout on the table as well. And look at other tiers of pensions that we can have in terms that changed a little bit, and we really need to tackle this problem. It's just really, really draining us.
Same question for you.
Great. I think you have a couple of different things going on. One is you have had significant mismanagement over decades, and that's not a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. That's a everybody thing. I don't think there are any clean hands in this challenge. The other problem that you have is you just have a systemic problem. To Karen's point, defined benefit plan is very hard to project and predict. And by the way, I love saying this to high school crowds because it means something more to you than it probably means to us. But as the numbers change, and over time it gets harder and harder. When I say the numbers change, what do I mean? I was talking to the head of the AARP Foundation. Does anybody here know what the AARP is, by the way? Besides all the old people. All right, so it's an association of retired people. And I was talking to the head of innovation there on a project for a startup company that I was working with. And he said part of his job was to determine how many members they would have in the AARP in the years to come and how long the members would live. And their calculations, this is a very well-known, reputable organization, their calculations are that anybody born after the year 2000, I think that's most of you, should expect to live to be 127 years old, right? So when you have a retirement system, it's all good for you guys, we're not gonna make that. But what it means is that when you have a defined benefit system and you're guaranteeing somebody a certain amount of money forever, as long as they live, and they retire in their 50s, and they live 60 or 70 more years, it's almost impossible to even contemplate how you could save the money, even if they save themselves, and how our system could save for them. So systemically, this defined benefit doesn't work, right? So now let's get to today where we are, right? Where we are is we have 987,000 people in the state of Illinois who work really hard. Either they're working today or they're retired. They're teachers, they're public sector employees, they're police officers, they're first responders. They're really important to the way our system works. And we owe them a debt. We owe them retirement. We owe them what they've saved for and what we said we would pay for. The challenge we have is to Karen's point, is that going forward, in order for us to meet those needs in the long term, we've got to change the system. So a 401k style plan is required, some form of matching, Social Security opportunity, which teachers don't have today. Those are really important. And the way that this work gets done is actually not in Springfield in the 70 days that we're down. The way this work gets done is on the ground, meeting with the stakeholders, bringing them together to agree, because this is an issue that's been polarized and politicized to the detriment of the people in the system and our state for a long time. This year I've spent an hour plus a day every day meeting with stakeholders, whether they meet Dr. Schuler, or the head of the North Chicago Fire Department, or the president of the Cicero Fire Department Pension Board. The stakeholders learning about what's going on. They want to fix this problem. They need someone to really lead on that. And that's why I'm going to Springfield.
Thank you.
Okay, so continuing with our state candidate Davie, you get to start this time. So as a result of Illinois' failing economy, our state is struggling with business attraction and retention. So what legislation are you going to support or sponsor to ensure that we stop losing our business to other states?
So it doesn't even start with legislation, and it's a great question. Another thing you do when you're out running for office is you're talking to people every day. And so I've had the opportunity to meet with almost half of the CEOs of the 36 Fortune 500 companies that are still headquartered in the state, and lots of employers who are smaller, but several billion-dollar sized businesses. And to a person, what they say is, for years now, we may be headquartered in the state of Illinois, but we are not investing in the state of Illinois. We're making our investments to the tunes of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in southern Indiana, Tennessee, and Texas, Wyoming, and other states, because they're concerned about one big issue, which is they're uncertain about what our state's going to look like in 20 years. Currently, we are the most taxed people in the United States. Right? So when you live in these communities, you pay the highest property sales and income tax put together. You pay the highest amount of taxes in the country. Your parents do, right? And we simultaneously have the worst debt and the worst credit rating in the country, right? So how do you look at that and say, hey, that's sustainable? You can't, which is our problem. So the market craves certainty. Businesses want to know that this is going to be a good place to be headquartered in 20 years. The only way that's going to happen is if two things happen. One is if we get the retirement system fixed, and two, we can get our credit rating raised, which, by the way, they go hand in hand together, and that's what the rating agencies are all saying. So it's not so much about legislation to bring businesses as much as it's about fixing the challenges we have. Because when you talk to businesses that are thinking about staying here, or businesses that are thinking about coming here, they all point to the same problem. If we didn't have the debt that we have right now, Amazon wouldn't come here as their second headquarters. But with everything that we have going on here, we missed the boat on that, most likely.
Thank you. Candidate Feldman?
Sure. So I sell real estate. I've been doing it for 28 years, and I think the business climate in Illinois has really been handicapped by the state. There's so many onerous regulations and red tape that it makes it really hard to actually own a business in Illinois and become successful. So, and I do a lot of relocation clients, so when they come here, I show them different communities and best fits. A lot of these corporations, they do the same thing. They come and they say, okay, so let's look at the area. Are there good schools? And yes, schools are great. There's a recreational facility for my employees. Is it close to the airport, transportation? Hey, what's the cost of living here? Can my employee afford a house and pay the taxes? Well, I think that pretty much answers it when they have to pay their employees. Probably twice as much as someplace else in the country, so they can afford to buy a house and pay the taxes. That's a big, non-starter for them. So I'd like to lift some of the regulations that really blacklist us from businesses coming here. There's no reason why we shouldn't be thriving with our neighboring states. They are all attracting businesses. They have the same location as us. They have the same workforce and resources. There's no reason why we shouldn't be thriving.
So candidate Feldman, when we're addressing our efforts in the direction of looking at these property taxes, do you think that these other aspects are going to suffer at the same time, like you talked about with recreation, location, are those going to suffer treating our efforts on property taxes?
So there's not one thing, there's no magic bullet for the state. You can't just fix one thing and, okay, that's great, and move on to the next issue. They're all intertwined, and I think if you can tweak every part of the state, it'll all start to get better. We can attract more businesses, bring more revenue, fund education at a higher rate, so we're not at 28%. Property taxes will go down, people can afford to stay in their houses, people don't want to move away. We can, another thing we didn't talk about is the higher education. The funding for that has really shot down, since the Blago years, like 16 years ago. They've been really neglected, and their facilities are really in disrepair and everything. And I think that we can fund education more and make that more accountable. But I think once you start tweaking everything and having everything work together, it'll slowly come back together, and people will have confidence to stay here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add something really quickly. I think, as Karen and I are both pointing out, the challenges need to be addressed and be fixed. But look, the great news about this incredible global city that we live in, Chicago, is that we do spark innovation. You go down and you go to 1871, you go to Tech Nexus, or you go to different innovation hubs that have been developed in the area, and that's a big part of this school district. The focus is to create experiences for you guys. There's a lot of entrepreneurship that's budding in this place. If you just think about from Lake Cook Road up to Abbott Labs, we have a life sciences corridor that's almost second to, it's only second to basically Cambridge, Massachusetts. So there's incredible opportunity here, but we want to try to really support that opportunity and make it a no-brainer for companies to want to be here, or risk capital to invest into early stage companies in this area, and that's a challenge right now. So I think that we're thinking about growing our way out of this problem, but we also simultaneously have to think about what is systemic wrong and how do we get it fixed.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be for candidate Bennett, and I know one of your key issues is healthcare. So since healthcare is a necessary expense, but it's often difficult to afford, what types of healthcare legislation would you consider supporting or sponsoring to try to reduce costs for both the employers and employees?
So I'm just going to ask you for a short clarification, which is, are you talking about health insurance, which is one thing, or health care, which is a separate thing? Because one of the things we found is that on the campaign trail, there's a lot of seniors for whom the actual price after Medicare for their health care itself is unaffordable, given the expense of living here in Illinois.
Yes, so the question is specifically about health care, not insurance.
So let's talk about healthcare for a few minutes then. So we have a large population of seniors, and what we've had is an explosion of cost for prescription drugs in particular. And what I see is three statements that come out. One is Medicare isn't working, drugs are too high, and the third one is Social Security doesn't even cover that. So it's either Social Security is too low, and that coupled with the property taxes they pay and the high cost of living here is driving people away from their families and out of state. And that's a terrible thing. So what we need to do is we need to revisit how we do, for example, drug prices and how we use economics in our favor and not against us. Here is a thing to think about. One of the things that we've done over the past 30 years is we've made it much more difficult for a company to come out with a drug in order to safeguard us. But our patent law that goes with that has been left behind. And so when a drug company used to have 20 years to try and make up all the research costs, which are pretty expensive, now they have half that time because it takes that much longer to get through the system. And what that basically does is the difference between a generic and the drug you pay, a lot of that is the research and development. If we lengthen the time out, we would reduce the cost per dose of these drugs and share the cost among more people and bring down the cost for each individual. So here's the point where you think about how the economics of it works, and you're trying to use supply and demand and basic math to try and use it to our advantage to bring down the cost for people who have specialty needs, specialty drugs, and allow people to stay in their houses. Because especially at the end of life, there's a a lot of amazing drugs. My wife is a cancer survivor. I'm a big fan of some of the drugs that these people put out because they save people's lives, but they've become ever increasingly more expensive as we've had ever fewer people able to share the cost of figuring out how they are. And what we're doing is we're shutting down our research and development facilities in places like North Carolina, which is the Research Triangle, and other places, because companies are looking at it like it's not worth it to find the next penicillin, the next antibiotic, because it's just too dangerous and too expensive, and that's really a terrible thing.
So
Can I
candidate
jump in?
Bennett?
Can I just add something for that? I'd like to sort of ask something that's related to the health insurance side of that question that I think might be related to younger people. One of the concerns that the health industry has, or that even the country has in the health debate, is that young people don't get health insurance. They think they're going to live forever. They don't think they don't need it. Is there anything the government should be doing to encourage students and young people to care more about and take more investment in their own health, good health? And if not, how do we address that?
Well, sorry. One of the things that happened, which was pretty much bipartisan, and one of the few parts of, I think, Obamacare that everybody had agreed on before, was that people who were up to 26 years old could be with their parents on their parents' health care and still be in a family coverage situation, which people felt were fairer. One of the problems we're seeing, though, is that the reason young people have a problem with health insurance is that we've shifted the cost of people who are elderly to people who are young. And that people who are young are paying far more in cost than they're going to receive in benefits. In an effort to make people who vote more often than you guys, hey, here's a message, right? Seniors vote, you guys don't. So guess who bears most of the cost? The people who don't vote. And that's what happened. People shifted the cost on younger, healthier people who weren't going to use the system to help people who are older, in their 50s. And, yeah, he's 30. People, they shifted the cost in an effort, and now that makes it very hard for people here to it's not as good a deal, to be real honest. And what we really should look at is a way to have a fair system where what you get out of your insurance is the value of what you pay in is the value of what you get out. And what we've done is put a huge tax on people who are starting out in their life, making it harder to start off and start their business, start their career, get a house, get their own place. And I think that's wrong. I think we have to think about how we do that better. And I don't think we're doing that very well.
Thank you.
Sorry, in the interest of time, we are going to move on. So these are for, sorry, Candidate Bennett. So we're going to move on to a question for our state representatives again. So Candidate Feldman, you're going to start us off. So recently the value of our homes has rapidly declined, which is what we've been talking about today. And that's been impacting the housing market that our parents are in, but we will eventually join as well. So while efforts have been made to address this problem, we failed to get back on par with our previous home values. So what do you plan on doing on the state level to improve the property value in Illinois?
So the economy has recovered, and real estate market is good everywhere but Illinois. We are the only state lagging in these issues. The value of your home it's an open market, so the value is really predicted by how much a buyer is willing to pay for it. So in terms of being in the state legislature, what you can do is you can't change the value, but you can do some things that can grow confidence in the buyers. You can, basically the grass across state lines is actually greener than it is here. The values go down because right now there's a lot of inventory. There's not a lot of buyers. They're losing people. I think the estimate was 1 person every 5 minutes from the state. That is also losing, potentially going to lose 2 congressional seats because of that as well. You have to grow confidence in the people to stay here. One way to not grow confidence in the people to stay here is by taxing them more. We're the highest tax state in the country. Imposing more taxes just makes people think, God bless you. And so we need to lower the property taxes. We need need to stop overpromising and underfunding pensions. We need to basically do everything differently. Because these problems didn't start overnight, they've been created over decades of bad policy choices. So until the confidence changes and people want to come here, the values will remain depressed.
Right, so Candidate Feldman, you talked about how we can't directly pass something that's going to change property value. So do you plan on implementing methods such as incorporating new urbanism into our communities to make them more community-oriented and a more desirable place to live, as you addressed our previous question about focusing on other aspects of living in Illinois than property taxes?
Sure. I would hesitate to do any kind of law that would, impose some kind of restrictions on communities. I think it really would need to stay to that local community, whether they want to create an urban feel or not, because what might be a good fit for one person may not be a fit for all, so it may not be valuable to somebody at all, but very valuable to somebody, the next person, so I wouldn't implement any kind of law like that.
Thank you. Candidate Davie?
We see it in local communities here, Chicago. Communities are confronting this issue and are rethinking what their housing stock looks like in zoning laws, and they're working hard actually to attract younger people to come north instead of settling in the city. And you see that especially with a lot of large companies that are in Lake County. It's something that they push various city councils and village boards on all the time. And you've heard about it, maybe something we did recently in discussions around kind of our rail system and putting a third rail in and some of the issues that were discussed there. So I think it's much better handled at a local level than at a state level because the communities are all very different. Getting back to the bigger issue though, look, the reality here is that we need a totally different vision and leadership for what we think this state can be and should be for our citizens and for the future, and what it should mean to the rest of the country. And I some may sound like a broken record, but I go back to it all the time. Fundamentally, we have incredible bounty here. I'll tell a little story here. So I was recently with the Israeli Consul General, a man named Aviv Ezra, and he told me this story about how there was a 400-year period when the Turks controlled the land of Israel. And he said to the people, he said, do you know how they taxed the people? And I said, no. And he said, they taxed the people based on how many trees they had on their land. And he said, what would you do if you were taxed based on how many trees you had on your land? What would you do? You cut them down. That's what happened, right? So they cut their trees down. When the trees are cut down and the roots dry up and die away and the topsoil blows away, you're left in the arid desert, right? And so you have this situation here in Illinois where we're constantly doing things to really hurt the foundation of what this state is. And Aviv said to me, there's probably 170 countries on the planet Earth that would like to be the state of Illinois, given all the resources that we have here, right? So we have an incredible place to work with, but our vision for where we want to be and then the execution on the plan to get there is sorely lacking. And that's not, again, not partisan. We can point at lots of folks who just aren't doing it. And so I think we need some changes in our legislature. We need a new approach to somebody who's willing to be.
Thank you very much.
Our next question is going to be both for our federal and state candidates. So we'll begin with candidate Bennett. What regulations are currently in place to protect those residing near nuclear power plants and other areas where hazardous substances are often stored and transported?
All right, this is once again part of the discussion your teacher had earlier about finding out that things were passing through her town and they were quite dangerous. Currently, one of the problems we have in nuclear power plants is we never figured out where to put the spent fuel rods, the waste of the power plant. And so nuclear power, which is the smallest carbon footprint imaginable, has left languishing because everybody's stepping back and waiting for someone else to decide where to put it. For a long time, we were going to put it in a seismically secure place in the middle of Nevada under a deep mountain in a salt place where no one could get to it. One person in the Senate kind of blocked that for a long time. And what's happened is we are now storing all this dangerous material all over the country. Even here, very close to us, up in Zion, there's a real danger that we are storing it right along the shores of Lake Michigan. And instead of going out and finding a place and taking it somewhere safe, away from people, away from everybody's drinking water, a great resource, it's just we're faced with a Washington that thinks it's okay to pay us to just keep it around just in case. So I think the first thing you have to do for this is get a place open, pick a place in the United States, make sure it's far from everybody, and put a storage facility that allows us to take these nuclear waste, get it somewhere safe, and bury it somewhere where it gets out of the 10th district, gets out of Illinois, gets out of where people live. And if you did that, then you could think about maybe more plants like that, which are better for our carbon footprint and are effective. But until we do that, we're really stuck where we are. And so that's the first thing. I think that's the only thing that we have to concentrate on to begin with, because if we don't do that, it will just sit wherever it is, because there's no place to put it on a train to take it to. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, and I think Doug did a good job of answering kind of what we do with what we had. I think the good news in Illinois is that we've had 33 new wind power station projects go online in the last 12 years. We've had 5 solar power station projects go online in the last 6 years. This is because of our location in the United States, we have the potential to create a significant amount of clean energy in the state. I think the good news is that a lot of folks have come into that space and started to try to grow businesses in that area. Even in spite of the economic challenges we have here, but I think we could significantly amplify and grow that industry if people have more confidence in the state and our regulatory scheme around this issue. So I'm a big supporter of that. I was actually at the Open Lands annual luncheon earlier today downtown, where we were talking about kind of the resources and conservation that's being done in Illinois. And again, getting back to what's so great about this place, I don't know if anyone knew this, but we're second to California in the lower 48 in terms of habitat and species biodiversity in the state of Illinois, right? This isn't, because this is such a long state, we have so many different habitats, this is an incredible place. So, you'll always hear me talking about what an incredible, bountiful place we have here, but how we need to better manage it.
I agree with Doug and Barrett and other comments. I would like to talk a little bit about the new FEJA program that has been implemented recently. That's the Future Energy Jobs Act. There is one part of it that talks about having renewable energy sources, and they set the goal for 25% of our energy production should be renewable sources by the year 2025, and I think that's an admirable goal. The issue with renewable sources, like wind and power, which is part of the program, that there's no way to store the excess energy that they produce. And so my tip to really high school, if you guys are looking to become a trillionaire, if you can figure out how to get a battery that store the energy from renewable sources, you would likely be a trillionaire, and I'll be your friend.
So if you guys want to give quick 30-second answers, since we're almost out of time, we want to draw back to the relevance of us being Wheeling High School students. So new voters just turning 18 comprise a significant portion of our votes, yet they often don't have the information that they need to understand the critical differences between all of our candidates. So how are you going to use your position to address voter education? So Trustee Stanton, do you want to start?
Sure. So this is about information, and you're going to need to be critical thinkers. And that means that you weigh the information you get, so you can't be afraid to ask questions, even if you don't know about the subjects. For example, things that you have heard here today, that Medicare does not work. I would challenge that. Medicare is one of the most efficient programs that we have. The myth of research and development resulting in high drug prices and justifying extending patent protection. Medical insurance that the rest of the world provides for its citizens that we in this country could well afford. So ask those questions. Don't be afraid. Someone says we're the highest tax state, look it up.
Thank you. Candidate Feldman.
So I would suggest listening to people, reading mailers, and I have firsthand experience with this. There's a billion mailers out there about me that are not true. That's not going to do it, but that's like branding, like branding Oreo cookies. Like you like them for a reason because you're getting a branding. But I would talk to the candidates. I would go to debates. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of debates because my home doesn't want to. So I would try to attend to everything that you can to hear. I would talk to people, and I would actually think critically for yourself and do your own research. You know, today everyone's inundated by so many ads. You have your cell phone in front of you, and you're getting all kinds of images just like in your face constantly, and it's stressful. It's hard to do the research, but please try. Actually, reach out to the candidates themselves, send them an email, make a phone call. I'd be happy to talk to you.
I would just encourage everybody to try to put away the words Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. They're thrown around all the time to label people, and I think that it's unfortunately gotten away from us. And I would encourage you to go to the candidates' websites, learn about the issues. Many of us now put up videos on all the issues. If you have a question, certainly at the local level, we get questions every day from people who want to know more about how we feel, what we stand for, and we respond to them within 24 hours. So challenge us, especially at the local level, to answer your questions or get on the phone, come by the office. We want to talk to you.
Thank you. Candidate Bennett.
Sure. So here's the thing. How many people feel that whatever they're going to do in this election personally, directly affects them, really? Right. It's not that you guys aren't smart. You guys are more tech savvy than most of the people we deal with, to be real honest. You can find out more stuff. You can use whatever you need to use to get it. So you are one of the most most capable people to find out whatever information you want. What isn't happening is you don't feel that this is something that really affects your life. And what drives down the voting is the fact that this isn't connected to you. And if we haven't connected with you with something that matters to you, and when I do this forum thing and we ask prepared questions, we don't often get where people are really thinking.
Thank you, Candidate Bennett. Our students have to catch the buses,
All right.
so sorry for the short responses.
Get out of here.